That's what I want to try and deconstruct today, is exactly like you said there, the art of time trialing, because it is multifaceted. You know, we've the bike, we've training, we've pacing, we've kit, we've fit. So we'll try and uncover and unpack as much of that as we can. Let's start it off on the bike. There's not an objectively fastest bike, but what are some principles that are what makes a fast bike?
Well, especially like nowadays, is it's trying to interact like like your wheel set with the frame alone. Really, like if you look at like all today's modern bikes, like we look at like all the brands, the margins are going to be relatively small. What we're generally seeing now is you're seeing like forks going like a lot wider. The rear stays it getting wider, but then we're able to like interact like the wheels with them as well. So rim shapes are like now evolving. Like you never think that we'll be on like 28 mil tires really.
I remember doing TTs on 19s, like 140 psi on 19s.
Absolutely. I always remember like I'd always save like 160 psi for the national champs. I'd always ride 120, but for the national, I'd always put them up to about 160. What we're also being able to see now is it's just like the integration of like cockpits onto the bikes themselves. It's quite funny, really. Like you look at like all the pro bikes, and like now we're seeing everybody's going for like the smaller frame with like the highest stacks. Like for the pillars.
Filippo Ganna look.
Yeah, and it's like I was doing like that 10 years ago, but now it's kind of like everybody thinks that it's like no. But that's where a lot of it is coming from. Like when we look at like the frame sets, the margins of them are relatively small, but a lot of it is coming from like the cockpits we're now able to fit onto the bikes and the interaction with the wheels really.
But like you have led so much of this innovation. Like that's something I noticed years ago, that you were riding very small bikes with these cockpits that we're now starting to see, the best TTers in the world doing. It almost reminds me, it's like Aubrey-esque that you're leading this innovation in time trialing for like a decade plus. Where does that come from? How are you?
I think that's quite nice for you to say that. It's like everybody thinks that, like now, I think a lot of people think it's new, but if you followed like the journey, it was kind of like my obsession to start it with it. It was like, I've always followed the sport, but I never knew how to get aero, and I never even knew how to ride power. This is back in like 2010. I remember I rode like the national championships. It was national 25. Michael Hutchinson won that day, and I wanted to be. My goal was always to beat Hutch. He was like this nemesis that I had for like years. But then I ended up finishing third, and a guy called Mark Colton beat me. And I was like, how the hell has this dude done this? I used to put like 2 minutes into him. He beat you by 20 seconds. And then I learned at that point that he'd been to the wind tunnel. He'd learned how to train and optimize like his pacing strategy. So I thought, right, I either quit the sport now or I've got to get onto that journey. And it's like at the time, like I'm a postman at this point. I was a postman for like 18 years. I had no money whatsoever. Like me and my wife just bought a house, got no cash. So I just thought, right, what am I going to do? So I reached out to a guy called Bob Tobin at Cycle Power Meters. And I just said, look, everyone's riding and starting to ride with power. Is there any chance you could sell me a power meter? But I can't really afford to buy one. Could you do me one in trade, or have you got a second-hand one? Because back then, like a power meter, even for a wheel, was like $1,500. If you wanted an SRM, it was like 3,000.
Well, here's a funny story actually to jump in on this one. I got my first power meter. It must have been 2008, 2009. I was in university. It was an SRM. I think it was €3,000. And obviously, as a student, I didn't have €3,000. So I went to the bank and I told them I needed a car to drive in and out to university. I had to submit all my university registration forms and everything. And I took that full 3,000 and I went on to Cycling Power Meters as well and bought myself an SRM.
It's crazy, isn't it? Like you just like you blew your mind. But then I probably like you, I got this power meter. Like Bob agreed, I'll do your deal on it. And I got it, and at that time, like the software, like Training Peaks was just on its way then, I guess. I didn't know what to do. It was just like this number, like this, it was on an SRM device, just generating like these numbers. I didn't know what it was doing. And then I asked Bob, look, You're trying to rent out power meters. How about I advertise your business and you train me to be like national champion? I can't afford a coach, but would you be interested in coaching me and I'll advertise your business? And luckily he agreed to help me. And then the journey kind of started from them, really. Like the first thing he said, right, you need to lift your hands up. I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I ride in like this really flat position. I was like really exposed. And it comes on. Then you've got to train this. You've got to roll your shoulders in. I was like, you've got to do a shrug. I was like, what the hell is a shrug? Like, and how am I going to sustain that? So, you're trying to gain like this position. And so, oh yeah, I can shrug. And then I started training in front of the mirror, like I'd hold this position as long as I could. And then, the results started coming. Like you could dramatically see this time starting to come down. And then I kind of, from that point, the next thing he said, right, we need to get you into the winter. And I'm like, oh my God, there's no way I can afford to go to the winter. And luckily, one of my best mates, he just said, look, he's got his own company. He said, I'll pay you to go to the winter. This is your opportunity. And I went to the winter, and that's when I met Simon Smart at Drag 20. And he was the guy that kind of, he evolved me into the position. And I think that's a bit, the art. You go to the winter where you learn quite a lot. And then I understood at that point, like, okay, realistically, I've got 3 positions that I can utilize like on the course, and I can utilize the power like in different ways, really. And then if I can train my body to adapt to all of this, and I'll be able to cut the times down. And within it probably took me a year and a half to kind of master that. And then the time just started to plummet. And I have got a very, people that know me, they'll know that I've got a very obsessive personality. So if I get into something, then that's it. I'm like hooked and I want to be the best at it. And that's what I'm obviously doing today. It's trying to help people understand those rules, really.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please click up here. There's another video I know that you're absolutely going to love. And click over here and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our amazing upcoming guests.